Welcome to Mindfulness Lists. The next sections of A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle are titled Letting Go of Self-Definitions and Pre-Established Roles. So let's talk about self-definitions. I wanted to clarify something. I know that I'm going over this book at a very slow rate. Like, you would think that the thing was a novel at the rate that I'm going over it, because basically the amount that I'm talking is longer than the audiobook. When you start reading about spirituality or philosophy, you'll find out that a lot of times people do this. They just sit and they ponder things. And I hope that you can participate in this experiment. The reason why I do this is because I want things to be very, 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 very simple and just approachable to anybody, to a child, so you can apply it in your life and so you can pass this information on. And as you see in all of my recordings, it always boils down to pretty much two things of all the stuff that I've ever covered in, my 50 plus episodes. It always comes down to two things: being aware of awareness, and that happens through keeping the subject-object relationship. You are the subject and your thoughts are the object. Always maintaining a solid foundation so you don't get lost in your mind and lost in the dream and fall asleep within the dream. And the second part is always keeping your heart open through acceptance to what is. If you close your heart to something, try the experiment. I've mentioned it in the past. Try to close your heart to one thing. You can't do it. When you close your heart to one thing, your heart closes to everything. And your heart is the main energy center in your body. So if you want to remain energized and have a happy, fruitful life and have some juice, in your reserves, keep your heart open. And acceptance doesn't mean approval. Acceptance just means stuff goes down, you accept it, and you work for change. So everything that I ever talk about will be about those two things. It's not the only way to to find a path to peace, but it is a way. It's not the way, but it is a way. And the thing about it is it's simple. It's something that you can easily remember. And so there's those 2 points that I make. Always being aware of awareness and keeping your heart open. Well, let's add one more. So those are the concepts, the 2 concepts that we have. The practice of it is meditation. You should meditate at least 3 times a week. At least 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. 5 minutes. I suggest doing it in the morning. What is meditation? Meditation is just being aware of awareness. There's different types of meditation, and I think like people's different personality types, probably different types of meditation suit people in different ways. If you're looking for some meditation techniques, go back to some of my first episodes. I explain how to meditate if you need some help on that. Or you can email me, and I have several different meditation techniques. I have taught yoga for a long time, and in order to help my students, I have studied a lot of different meditation techniques, because I don't think that one shoe fits all. I think that you should find what suits you. And doing this stuff, it's just putting money in the bank. It's preventive maintenance. Stuff is going to go wrong in our life. And when you do meditate, it gives you a wider perspective. You're able to step back for a minute and just realize that, hey, there's other people that have went through this stuff that I'm going through, and they have made it, and I will make it. And you get that kind of perspective through meditation, you're able just to have a little bit of extra reserves, a little bit more patience, and it creates space is what it does. So when stuff goes down, instead of reacting, you act. You come up with a solution rather than dwelling on the problem. So that's my little ramble. Now back to the sections. Letting go of self-definitions. Wait a minute, I'm not done rambling. So the reason why I ramble like this, it's I think in Indian culture, they call it satsangs. And what a satsang is it's just a talk about what we're talking about, consciousness, talk about mindfulness. And that's all we're having here. I'm just trying to look at different aspects of life, and hopefully I'll tell you some things. Maybe you listen to this on your way to work. And what I like about podcasts, I listen to Joe Rogan a lot, and it makes me feel like I'm just chilling with some bros, and hopefully you feel that way, just sitting there. Maybe I spawn some ideas of yours and you go off on a total different tangent, whatever it is. Maybe it can do something completely the opposite of what my intention is, and that's fine. I hope that you're enjoying it, and I definitely enjoy it, because when you review something like this, when me reviewing these books, I'm just looking at it through a microscope, basically, and splitting atoms. And when you do something like that, whatever you do, you learn it really well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. As I've mentioned, you can always email me. My email is mindfulnesslists@gmail.com. And any suggestions, any solutions, anything that you would like covered in the future, I'm going to go over a lot of practices. I'm going to start doing different practices of different types of meditation and stuff. Right now, I just wanted to go over a couple of my favorite books, because I wanted to create a good foundation for you guys. And as I've said, it's very simple. There's the three things that we talk about, the three solutions. We talk about being aware of awareness, keeping your heart open, and meditating. Those are the three things. So if you missed the last 50 episodes, that's all it's been about. Back to the point. Again, for the second time, did I stutter? Letting go of self-definitions. So now that I have spoken, I'll give Eckhart Tolle a little chance to say some stuff that maybe he wanted to say. What he says is, as tribal cultures developed into the ancient civilizations, certain functions began to be allotted to certain people: ruler, priest or priestess, warrior, farmer, merchant, craftsman, laborer, and so on. A class system developed. That would have sucked. That really would have sucked. And so he goes on to explain that the thing about this class system is it allowed people to, it gave them self-definitions. When you are, you're whatever, the cake baker, or you're the carpenter, or you're the seamstress, or you're whatever, it gives you a sense of self. I'm the carpenter, and I build the houses in this village. And, God, that would seem lame, but you had some type of identification, of who you were. And God, that sounds so damn limiting, and it sounds like it would just suck being born into that. I am so thankful that we live in this day and age to where we can choose whatever we want to be. And once you choose what you want to be, you can change it. You don't like it, there's never a loss in learning. You choose something, you go on and choose another one. But something that really sucks about that ancient system, the class system, is that you had it created a I'm at a loss for words. It created vision, or it created a definition of who you were. So if you have a definition of who you are, then what that does is it limits you. Definitions are limiting because you define something. When you define it, you just define it to whatever your definition is, and then it can't be anything else. And we do that a lot of times. What happens when we define things, and a lot of people like to do it, they like to define everything. What it does is it limits your world. When something goes down during the day and you say, oh my God, Susie said blah, 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 and then she blah, blah, blah. And then it's just like, I'm not trying to split atoms and be such a dork here, but it's limiting, like we can say those things go down and it brings up emotions. We start thinking things. And so we might as well say it if we're thinking it. Just say, oh my God, I can't believe this happened or whatever. I'm so happy this happened. But realize, be aware that those things are defining. When you say this person, this is who they are, then it defines them and it limits them. And what it does is it limits you, because when you define something, what you're doing is you're defining it in relation to you. Here I am and here they are. This is who I am and this is who they are. And it limits things. There's an infinite amount of definitions that we could choose, to where when you just choose one definition, it limits it. I'm this person and this is what happened. And that's the story of our world. That's how history is. And when you limit things, it stops them from being infinite. And you have this limited perspective now. And it's kind of like being stuck in the mud. It makes your life suck, because when you expect a person to be a jerk, usually they'll probably be a jerk to you. It's not dry and cut, but most likely when you expect a person to be a pain in the butt, it happened to me the other day. These people walked into the restaurant and oh my God, it sucked. And I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. Was it a self-fulfilling prophecy or am I intuitive? Luckily these people walked in and, they were the first people in the morning, luckily. And I said something, my coworker said something, and I said, those people are old, sometimes old people are picky. And sure as shoot, I went over to their table and they wanted a bunch of special stuff. And I was just like, thankful. What happens is, sometimes at my work, it'll be really busy and people just want this special order of everything. Oh, and I don't like olives and blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, I have, there's 50 other people in the restaurant, 70 other people waiting to order while this person is telling me their life story about why they don't like olives. And olive got stuck up their nose when they're a little child. I'm like, God, I wish it would have. Oh my God. So I'm just human as well, but I'm aware that I have these thoughts, so I'm not asleep. Everything worked out. The people got their meal. It was wonderful, but defining yourself through thought is limiting yourself, is what Eckhart Tolle says about it. It is, we can have thoughts, we could have opinions, but realize that there are other thoughts and other opinions and multiple universes that we can live in, dude. So the next section is called pre-established roles. Here's what Eckhart says about it. What really matters is not what function you fulfill in this world, but whether you identify with your function to such an extent that it takes you over and becomes a role that you play. When you play roles, you are unconscious. So I was just playing a role a second ago of the waiter role. And they really are limiting. Roles are limiting. Thoughts are limiting as well, as I was saying. But these roles are limiting as well. So now I can only refer to the world as a waiter. I'm talking to everybody about food and they're like, hey, Mr. Dork, We're not at a restaurant. We're at Disneyland. And so then I become the Disneyland tour guide. And that's my role when I'm at Disneyland. Although I don't like Disneyland. I'm not happy. It's not a small world after all. It's a huge world. Jesus. Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit more. I'm sorry. I'm being silly today. It's in the morning. I'm feeling good. I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to have a great day. So what really matters is not what function you fulfill in this world, but whether you identify with your function to such an extent that it takes you over and becomes a role that you play. It's easy to get lost in roles, but it's draining. It's draining. It's draining to be a parent. It's draining to be the shoulder to lean on all the time. It's draining to be the man. It's draining to be the sensitive person. It's draining to be the businesswoman. It's draining. These things are draining. They're limiting, and try it. When you uphold that thing, it's just extra effort. Things take effort anyways, but when you put your sense of self in it, when I start huffing and puffing at my work, it's extra work, to whereas I know it so well, I can do it without thinking or saying anything. Most people could. It's a, pretty easy job. I think most jobs, maybe if you're just doing some crazy job where you really need to think about, what way this atom is going to go when you do this experiment, most people don't need to think. Most people just, you're old enough to where you have your job down. It doesn't require anything. And putting a sense of self in it, it's just our sense of self. It's this little story of who I am and where I came from. And it could easily be another story. You could look at it from just a slightly different angle, and it's a different story. So don't get lost in those stories, and don't get lost in those roles. Just be aware of it. Just be aware when you start telling those stories and start putting in extra effort that you're doing it to yourself. Eckhart says, although the social structures in the contemporary world are less rigid than in ancient cultures, there are still many pre-established functions or roles that people readily identify with, and which thus becomes part of the ego. This causes human interactions to become inauthentic. Yes, it does. You go into a certain place. I usually just like to break the ice. You go into McDonald's. Not that I eat at McDonald's, but anywhere, just going into a place and just treating people like regular people, not like, hey, this is, somebody that works at McDonald's. It's just another person making a living, the gas station attendant, whoever it is, just going in there and just saying, what's up, Buttercup? How you doing? And instead of like, yeah, you can't always do it. Sometimes you're in a rush, but really looking into people's eyes and realizing that the humility of life, that we're all going through the same stuff. We're all just trying to have a good day. We all want to have a good day, and not getting lost in those roles, and being real and thinking about, other people and how their day's going, and looking into their eye, and just sensing the humility of it all and thinking about others. So it's strange. In this section, pre-established roles, Eckhart Tolle starts talking about the hippie movement back in the 60s, and how when the Vietnam War came along, that these people had waken up to see that in the 50s that people were really in line, and they followed the rules and stuff. But the Vietnam War was such a messed up thing that people woke up and they saw, how terrible that war was, and they started disobeying. And probably part of that was yoga coming along, and people doing LSD and doing mushrooms and stuff and waking up. But it's funny how those, that was, it was a changing of society. People started saying, we're not going to uphold these rules. We're not going to be, we're not going to we're not going to be these rules that society has told us to do. We're going to do whatever we dang well please. And then that became a role as well, being the rebel, being like, I'm not going to follow the rules. It's another role as well. So it's kind of strange how those things, they help out, and then it just becomes part of the dream as well, as if we identify with those things as well. Oh, I'm Mr. Anti-war or whatever, rather than just being, okay, I'm just awareness, and that's all I ever was. That's what I am, and that's all we ever will be. I'll see you next time. Time is an angel or devil, best friend or worst enemy.